This is a production of Cornell University.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of our research work is access and use of information communication technologies by women staff of public extension service in North Central Zone of Nigeria. Agricultural extension personnel are very important in the development of the lives of farmers and agricultural development generally, because they use vital agricultural information which they pass across to farmers and make them to have better knowledge and produce better. But we noticed that in Nigeria, when agricultural extension services began, and along the line that women were not carried along, women farmers. And there are many, there are more, a lot of them, not only in Nigeria, but all over the places. Millions of women are working on the farm as farmers, as farm workers, and as contributors to agricultural development all over the places. But these women were not carried along, and most of the activities were centered on men. So some studies were carried on along the line, gender-related studies, from which the idea of forming a group, which is basically women extension workers that will be concentrating on the work on women, will be established. And that is how the women group, which is called the Women in Agriculture, was created in the agricultural development programs in Nigeria. Agricultural development programs, generally, when we say agricultural development programs, we mean a general agricultural extension service that is more of federal attraction. And so it is a public extension service, it's not private. So the women in agriculture, actually, as I was saying, they are standing as tools for increasing agricultural productivity of rural women. And we know that rural women have a lot of activities that they carry out on the farms, some of which are like processing of roots and tubers, processing of vegetables and fruits, organizing women into groups, holding meetings with them, helping them to get loans, helping them to find markets for their products. So in all these activities, women in agriculture, called WIA, is found very useful. However, generally, extension does not have enough staff for the teeming population of farmers, with about only 2 extension workers to about 1,000 farm families. It became so important and unavoidable that extension must have need of information communication technologies if they have to go a bit far in the intention and their activities. Because of the unique benefits of ICTs, it has been recognized as a major tool for empowering both men and women. However, there is a question, and that is, can women really be empowered if they are digitally excluded and they lack access to information, quality access to information? Already, knowledge information and knowledge gaps exist in the society generally, and majority of women are not on the favored side of the divide, whether they are in urban or rural areas. So the fact that ICTs are necessary tools for extension information exchange between WIA and rural women, we have tried to point it out. Also, WIA, it has been pointed out that WIA is a major source of information exchange or dissemination to rural women in Nigeria, and that the women are not on the favored side of a digital divide that is in existence has been established also. Because of that, it has led to this study, which sought to investigate how far WIA sub-program in the ADPs has found ICT tools applicable to their extension services. And specifically, the study focuses on, one, to identify the ICT equipment or tools that are available to WIA, ICT equipment, to identify the ICT equipment or facilities that WIA had access to, and to determine the level of the utilization of ICT facilities by WIA sub-program in the ADPs, and to ascertain the WIA activities that the ICT tools were used for, and also to ascertain the perceived constraints in the use of the various ICTs by the WIA in agricultural extension programs. This study was carried out in the study was carried out in the northern zone of Nigeria, which consists of 6 states and the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. All the staff of women in agriculture, whether at the federal, the state level, or at the zonal level, or at the block level, as the agricultural development work is according to the hierarchy. All the women at all the levels that work as women in agriculture, they form the total population of our work. And 3 states were selected out of the 6 states, and then using the simple random sampling technique, while the Federal Capital Territory was purposely or purposively selected. Data for the study was collected from the respondents using the structured interview schedule. The table here shows us how we arrived at the population from the state level to the zonal level and to the block levels. The WIA director, the deputy director, the subject matter specialists, WIA, and the block extension agents, WIA. The total population we used was 80 women in agriculture. Objectives 1 and 2 were analyzed using frequency and percentage. Objectives 3, 4, and 5 were analyzed using frequency, percentage, and mean scores. Results and discussion. A few of the women, 33% for radio, and 22.5% for video machine, 27.5% for television, and 40% for telephone, had these ICT tools in their offices. Majority of them, as we can see, did not have most of the digital ICTs in their offices. And the fact that these ICTs are not available in the offices shows that, obviously, the work of we as extension agents will be adversely affected. Majority of the respondents also had access to telephone, television, and radio, as can be seen in the table there, at 87.0, 85.0, and 80.0, and 57.5 for telephone, television, radio, and video machine, respectively. But the fact that even though the availability of the ICT tools in the offices was not much, we saw that they had access to those ICT tools to a great extent. That is why it is like that, and that shows that they could put, if they had the access, they could put them into use and come up with a better approach towards extension activities. Looking at that figure there, we saw that internet website attracted only 28.8% of the women. And out of these few percentage of them, we had, out of these few percentage of them, we have that those that visited the internet, a greater percentage of them visited at a more frequent rate, 74% of them twice a week. And they visited the internet to access, to get information mainly, and browsing to get information, and agricultural information are part of the information they get to help them in their activities. Also, respondents, the results show that the respondents had radio, video machine, and telephones, that they used them to a large extent from this result. Also, as regards where activities, which the ICTs were used for, the results show that majority of them used radio and telephone for such activities as tuber crops and fruit and vegetable processing. And majority of them also use telephone for food fortification activities. But for HIV and AIDS awareness campaign, very minute population made use of such ICT tools as radio, telephone, and television. And the major constraint as observed by WIA from this study were lack of training opportunities that they didn't have, insufficient availability of ICT tools, and lack of technical knowledge or know-how. Because of that, we arrived at these recommendations that efforts should be made by all the ADPs to establish functional ICT centers with departments for WIA in all the states of the Federation. Efforts should also be made to facilitate ownership of modern ICTs by the WIA extension staff through loans and hire purchase procedures from their offices, and that ADP management and government should set up projects that will make ICT trainers and training materials available for WIA to meet their training needs and usage of ICT facilities. Thanks for listening.
I'd like to thank CTA for supporting my participation in this conference. I'd also like to thank IAALD and the other organizers for organizing this wonderful, wonderful events for us to come and share our findings and even to network. My name is Dorine Odongor from Kenya. I work with the Sign Center. The Sign-Off Center basically is a research and training institution, organization. We do research on various topics in agriculture, but we also do trainings for researchers and postgraduate students on policy advocacy, on communication, on writing and publishing. But my interests mainly are in knowledge management, knowledge brokerage, technology transfer. So this study on agricultural information access among smallholder farmers is part of a study that I did for my master's when I was taking my master's degree in agricultural information and communication management. So it's one of the objectives that I was looking at, and it's a comparative assessment of the peri-urban and rural settings in Kenya. Information, communication, and knowledge, these have always mattered in agriculture because farmers continually seek information, they communicate with each other, you know, they have various information sources, they use different communication channels, and they have knowledge, you know, in their attitudes, in their experiences, in the skills that they've developed, you know, embedded in the systems. All these have always mattered in the agricultural practices and systems for a long time. And therefore, information access and knowledge management generally is an important subject in agriculture. If we look at the overview of knowledge management in agriculture sector in Kenya, with respect just to the generation and dissemination, we find that we have over 28 agencies that engage in agricultural research, as according to the Strategy for Revitalization of Africa in Kenya, some of which are public funded, including commodity funded, and even international institutions. There are also universities and other technical institutions that engage in research activities, therefore generating information. We have the agricultural and extension and advisory service providers in Kenya, both government and non-government, who therefore have the mandate of passing on this information, disseminating the information. There are numerous ICT-based informations in Kenya. And Kenya being regarded as an ICT hub in sub-Saharan Africa, having pioneered in various ICT-based interventions, access of ICT services and all that. And there's also a lot of indigenous knowledge that is available in the farming communities, in the farming systems. All this contribute to the whole knowledge management continuum in agriculture. Extension and advisory services, you know, are some of the most knowledge-intensive elements, including research of agricultural and innovation systems, because research involves generation of knowledge. Extension involves dissemination of this knowledge, and you know, extension services improve the knowledge base of farmers through a variety of means, through demonstrations, through group meetings, face-to-face interactions with extension agents and all that. And so agricultural and extension therefore operates within a broader knowledge system. And like I said, that includes research, it includes education, it includes the indigenous knowledge that is available and all that. Now, if we look at the extension system landscape in Kenya, we realize that the government extension system is constrained in terms of staff, looking at the ratio of 1 to 1,093, that is the ratio of one extension agent to the number of farm households that he's supposed to cover, against the recommended. I think the recommended should be, 1 to 400, if I'm not wrong. I'm not sure, but around there. So having realized this, the government of Kenya therefore embarked on a policy review, and I've reviewed the extension policy in Kenya from the National Agricultural Extension Policy in 2002 to now the new policy that we have, the National Agricultural Sector Extension Policy, 2008. This one, therefore, now acknowledges the constraints that are there, and it embarks on promoting innovative approaches, which include now a pluralistic approach of extension services, which now appreciates that there are various actors who provide extension services apart from the government. There are input suppliers, there are private companies, of course talking also of the ICT-based services, and a lot of emphasis has been placed on ICT, looking at ICT as holding a lot of potential in terms of shaping and reshaping how farmers and even other people access information. So a lot of emphasis has been placed on that. And in Kenya, there are numerous mobile phone-based technologies that enable farmers to access information. Some are internet. In fact, even the government has an internet-based initiative, the National Agricultural Farmers Initiative Information Service, where the farmers, it's a voice-based as well as internet-based, so the farmers can log onto the internet and access whatever information they need, even if it's market information. They can also call a certain hotline and get this information. So all this then promises potential for enhancing access to information. But then the question is, to what extent has this potential been tapped? You know, to what extent are the ICT-based innovations being used? How accessible are the knowledge sources that we are talking about that are different and numerous? How accessible are they? And so therefore, what is the status of the adoption of these innovations? So this is what I set out to find out in the field. And like I said, I carried out a study in 2 districts, 2 settings, to compare how the situation is in rural areas and in peri-urban areas. We did a purposive sampling. We used questionnaires, so we were specifically targeting horticulture farmers. We used questionnaires, we used focus group discussions, and we also used key informant interviews to target the extension agents that are available, that are present in the districts. And we used SPSS to analyze. Now, we realized what we found out is that farmers' information needs differ significantly between the two settings. And this information needs influences the sources of knowledge that the farmers commonly used. When we went to the rural areas, the rural setting, we found out that the most important knowledge that the farmers consider was on market prices and availability, as well as input prices and availability, and also pest control. This was significantly different from the peri-urban setting, where the farmers mostly just need normally the agronomic, generally, the general agronomic package for production, and also issues of post-handling and availability. And then, based on this, we realized that the most popular source of knowledge that is used in the rural area were the input suppliers and the private companies, different from the government extension agents, which was more popular in the peri-urban setting, and the farmer associations. We'll see how this, why this was the reason as we go on. And then also the source used most often, like I mentioned, differs. Even though the government extension system and agents have a nationwide representation, because they have offices in each and every division of the country, you find that the accessibility and even use by the farmers differs significantly. I think this is because of, maybe because of the proximity of their offices. Like I said, the government revised the extension policy. The previous extension policy that was there, NIPE, was basically advocating for demand-driven services, where they were saying that the farmer has to demand for the service. So if the farmer will not go to the extension offices, then really they get to know very little about what the government extension agents are doing, and so they don't use them much often. But you see, in the peri-urban setting, there's easy accessibility because the public transport system is available. Their offices are available throughout, and it's cheaper than in the rural areas where they perhaps used to have to use maybe a motorbike to access the office or even walk. And then also the tools and approaches used by extension agents are not significantly different. Mainly, most of them use the group approach, the individual approach, making farmer visits, and even trainings. So basically, mostly it involves a face-to-face interaction with the farmers. There was no significant difference in that. Now, different ICT types were considered in this particular study. We looked at radio, we looked at television, mobile, internet, and traditional forms of ICT, like radio and TV, are still very, very important in in information access, especially in the rural areas, because of the vernacular-based FM stations. So we found that radio was most popular still in both settings. But when it comes to the mobile phone-based innovations, these were more popular in the rural setting than in the peri-urban setting, even though the percentage of farmers using them was still lower, less than 50% in both settings, but more farmers were using them in the rural areas than in the peri-urban areas. And of course, televisions, a lot of farmers in the peri-urban settings are relying on them than in the rural areas. Internet is still very, very low due to, most farmers don't know how to use internet. They don't even know about them, and also the issue of connectivity. And I would say the accessibility of these particular ICT-based innovations was different based on a number of reasons. For example, even though radio, like I mentioned, is still very, very popular at more than 87% of farmers saying they use them, the farmers still cite a number of challenges as, hindering their use of this particular tool. And we realized a lot of farmers were citing inconsistency and inconvenience in timing of the program. So the farmer says, if today I tune in for a certain program at 8 p.m. and next week I tune in at the same time, then it's not aired. I don't know what the problem could be with that. So because there's no inconsistency, the farmers don't rely on them very much. Mobile phone based, like I said, is still very low despite the numerous interventions that are there, numerous innovations that are there. It's still less than 50%. And most farmers, more than 60%, do not know about these innovations. They have no information about them, Internet-based, the main hindrance is about usage. They don't know how to use internet. They don't know what internet is. Of course, television, for most of the farmers in the peri-urban areas, it's readily available. They have electricity. But in the rural areas, they don't have a television, so they can't rely on it as a source of knowledge. Now, like I mentioned, the difference in information needs and subsequent difference in knowledge sources used is influenced by the setting and it's context specific. You realize that in the peri-urban setting, like I mentioned, the farmers have different needs from those ones in the rural setting. In the rural setting, most of the farmers that we were able to come across are in contract-based farming, where they produce French beans, which they target the international, the export market, as opposed to the peri-urban setting, where they only produce for the local market. And we realized that this was a major influence in terms of how they produce, because you see, the farmers who produce for a specific export market then have to follow certain standards. And so they heavily rely on the private companies for extension and advisory services. They also rely on the input suppliers because they are willing even to pay because they target a specific market. And they produce just the specific crops. So that's what I mean by local, context specific. Now, higher percentage of farmers in peri-urban settings, 76%, use government extension agents most often. I've mentioned that. Only 28% of those in the rural setting use government extension agents. Mainly, like I mentioned, is because of accessibility and proximity of the offices so that they can access them wherever and whenever they need. Even though the extension agents have given out their mobile phone numbers to the farmers so that they've actually displayed it in their offices so that farmers can call wherever they need to consult. But this practice was seen to be widely practiced in the peri-urban setting than in the rural setting. Now, a very interesting finding was that news of neighbors and relying on their own knowledge as a main source of knowledge was very significant in both settings. If I can go back to that same graph, this was at almost more than 90%. They say they rely on their own knowledge, and they also rely on their neighbors. And this basically just emphasizes on the importance of face-to-face interaction of individuals in knowledge acquisition and sharing, and the importance of implicit knowledge, tacit knowledge in agricultural production. It still contributes heavily. Now, ease of accessing different sources of ICT-based innovations influences their use, like I mentioned. And I mentioned that this is because of the presence of, the context, like I said, and the setting. Okay, I've mentioned that there's issue of inconsistency and inconvenience in timing of the programs and lack of information of these technologies as the major factors that hinder the access and use. Now, in conclusion, the entry of non-government stakeholders in the extension advisory services has increased the farmers' sources of knowledge. Now, it's easier to access knowledge because there are other options that are available for the farmers. And there's also significant difference in the channels used to obtain information in the peri-urban and rural setting. Use of ICT is influenced by nature of business, of course, with respect to types of crops grown, like I mentioned, and even infrastructure. So what we are recommending is that even though the government has a new extension policy that recognizes or advocates for a pluralistic approach involving multiple or different stakeholders, there is need for them to ensure harmonization and put in place structures for collaboration. And also, the major recommendation is the issue of awareness about these innovations that have been developed. They need to create more awareness and also train the farmers as well as the extension agents on how to use these ICT-based innovations, ensure inconsistencies, and also would like to know how the situation is in other areas. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to use this opportunity first to thank CTA and ITOCA for giving me the opportunity to showcase actually what we are doing in order to get the best services for our users in our university. It is, we are looking at how we are going to provide the preferred information resources for the new faculty. Our university have a new faculty of agriculture, so we don't want to take any chance of giving them anything, but actually what they will want to have. So that was why we embarked on this research. You see that information professionals, we don't rest until we provide the right services, information services. And it is not easy to provide such service because change is not easy. But it's only when we change that we grow. And change is inevitable, but we have to persist because it is what brings about moving from the Stone Age to the information age. This is the outline for my presentation. We have a university that has 14 faculties. It was established as a private university, but it was upgraded to a federal university in 1992. Actually, because it is not the focus of this research, I will jump this slide because my time is short, only 10 minutes. For the Faculty of Agriculture that was established in 2010, they have the philosophy to produce graduates and experts with broad-based practical and functional training, focused on mobilizing resources to provide opportunities for improved performance in agriculture. And they have 7 departments, though only 6 have taken off. Soil science has not taken off. But for the library, though the university library is providing broad-based resources, including that will serve the faculty, but because Faculty of Agriculture is interdisciplinary, but then we really want to provide a new state-of-the-art library, agric library for them. And that is why we are looking at just what the library does. We serve only about 9,000 registered users because users don't come to register in the library anyway. I don't know. We have 92 volumes of books. We have operations and services, traditional and electronic or state-of-the-art. But then the question is, do they actually use it? Then we embark on this research. The rationale is for us to provide, like I said, state-of-the-art faculty library. And why do we want to look at the research? It's a new faculty, and people who are members of the faculty, both the faculty and the students, are coming from different backgrounds, the urban and the very remote environment, and the researchers, faculty researchers from different institutions. And we don't actually know what services they have been provided for or they are aware of. So we really want to find out the resources and services they are familiar with, and the service mode or access mode they would love to have, so that we provide the right one for them from the onset. So we engage ourselves on this research. Because the population of the new faculty is only 25 lecturers and 193 students. So we used 20 faculty and 129 students. Actually, with our discussion with the dean, he insisted that the dean of the faculty insisted that we should use quantitative research questionnaire, because you don't see the students, you don't see the lecturers. Said we should drop it for them so that wherever they find them, they administer the questionnaires. And the questionnaire, they were all based on the resources used, services preferred, and the mode of access they prefer. So with the result, we discovered that majority of the students and staff are, in fact, above 90% are aware of or have used the library before, and the majority of them have used academic libraries, not least used research library. But then they were familiar with only traditional print services. Very few of them have used offline database precisely till. And then we tried to find out, we didn't ask this question the lecturers, because we knew the lecturers would have used libraries, so we didn't ask them this question, but we wanted to find out the services they used before, the lecturers, having gone through the university. And we discovered that actually it's still the traditional services they have used. It's predominant in Nigeria, and but then the till is still coming up. They have used it, 50% of them have used till. We have till in our university and some other agric universities in Nigeria. And then we looked at the resources they used before, traditional resources actually, books in print form, journals, reference materials, but we see a sign of increased use of electronic journals. And then we wanted to find out from the students what they are using the library for, the library they used before, and then we discovered that majority of them use it for assignment, examination, and the leisure. And then we went further to find out which resources they would prefer. It's still going down to the fact that they want the traditional resources, but there is increased interest in e-books. If you can look at it, you see the e-books and e-journals, they are interested. But when you look at the geographical resources like maps, directories, calendar, you see that they are not interested in that. And I suspect because Nigerians are not very good in geography, they're not interested in geography. I'm one of them, anyway. So we went further to find out the preferred format. And then we discovered that they want to have the format in hybrid form, that is in print and electronic. But then you see that the traditional resources, the traditional format is being preferred by the staff, more by the staff than the students. Why the students, they prefer the electronic more. And then the students, they prefer the online electronic, usually because they do a lot of searching engines. Instead of, they don't prefer the electronic because they are using the subscribed databases, but they prefer it because they use a lot of search engines. Then we went further to find out the access mode, and we still discovered that both groups prefer the online public access. Probably that may be the reason why they don't come to the library anymore. They prefer to be in their various domains and have these resources. But then the students are still asking for search engines. They want to access the resources using search engines. But the staff, because I don't know what the problem is, you see, the lecturers are very much interested in traditional, they have refused to grow. They're very much interested in the traditional format than the access mode than the students. The students are crazy about the internet and the internet services. But then both of them, because the library has introduced through our social media services, we have introduced through the social media tools, we have introduced social media services, but not many of them are very much interested in that, both the staff and the students. But that notwithstanding, we wanted to know, assuming we give them social media services using the social media platform, how would they look at it? And we discovered that they are all aware of it. Of course, they are, because in the university system, everybody is using mobile phone, and they are all there. They see, they chat, they do this. But then the staff, only very few staff are using some of these social media platforms. They are using only Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. But the students are using almost all the social media platform or tools we provided for them. And because the staff are not using majority of it, they cannot tell you why they are, whether they would like to have the service assuming you, because they are not aware of it. And part of the reason why they are not using it is that they indicated that they don't have the knowledge to do it, lack of knowledge and skill, that is capacity. But the students are saying that actually, since we are using all this, if you give us services using the social media, actually we are going to welcome it, because those who say that they welcome that service, they say that it's highly accessible and highly interactive. So, looking at that, we concluded that library services will be effective and efficient when user needs are identified and services provided in a way and manner required. And we discovered that the members of the faculty use print library. They will prefer hybrid services. They need traditional library resources and electronic resources, but they are open to innovative social media services. And the members of the faculty, not very knowledgeable, stay boiling down on capacity. They are not knowledgeable in electronic and social media tools. And the lack of knowledge will hinder acceptability of electronic and social media services. So we look at it and say that if we are intending to provide them the services they need, we give them traditional resources, we give them services and operation that will be automated to provide remote access, and we give them social media-driven services, as well as we continue to give them capacity. In fact, the primary thing in that institution, both for the agric and for non-agric faculty, is that there is need for capacity, especially in the area of ICT. So, what is your advice? We want to provide state-of-the-art agric library. What do we do based on the findings? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chinwe, Elizabeth, and Dorine. I think we have about 5 minutes for questions. I had to rush them because we had lost time. I did not want us to go beyond the allocated time for this session, since we have other sessions to follow. So the floor is open for questions to the members of the panel. We are going to use the mic that is there. So if you have a question, you walk there and you put up your question. If it is directed to a specific individual, if you don't know the name, you may say the lady in the middle, on the right, on the left. Okay, please.
My question is to the second speaker. I think she's a scientist. It's a direct question in the sense, suppose a farmer is faced with a problem. Say, for example, in the case of crop diseases, stem rust they have got while growing, or maybe in case of cattle they have rinderpest disease. So where do they go? See, it's not the information, but backup support. Where do they seek that support?
Okay.
I think the main backup that the farmers have in case they have any problem is the government extension agents. So the first person normally they would go to are the extension agents, or unless there is a presence of an established alternative extension agent provider. Like, for example, if you're talking of if a farmer is facing a certain pest disease, and they normally use, because these days we have other input suppliers like Army Run Limited or Syngenta, and they have their presence in the districts in terms of they support these farmers in certain technologies like greenhouse technology. So if this farmer is facing a certain problem and they are aware that maybe a certain input company is available, they would go there. But normally, the first place they would go to is the Ministry of Agriculture.
Okay, Collins. Brief.
Okay, thank you so much. I wanted to know, Dorine, to what extent maybe do national language policies impact on access to knowledge with regards to both modern scientific knowledge as well as indigenous knowledge, which is also critical for agriculture, because we are also grappling with the same issue where, because of multiplicity of languages, and then we know what we call national language policies that are limiting in terms of accommodating maybe the multiplicity of languages.
Okay, maybe, Doreen, before you answer, let me pose my questions. Elizabeth, your study discovered that majority of the women in agriculture do not have access to ICTs, and especially computers. Is this specific to the women in agriculture, or it is a general situation in the departments where they are working? Doreen, several mobile-based innovations targeting farmers have come up in Kenya. Why is there low adoption of these innovations? Chinwe, why is there low usage of electronic resources? Because it seems like the emphasis was much more on print-based, and you are trying to push for digital-based. How are you going to handle that situation? So please be quick and to the point. So we start with Doreen.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with the question from,
Collins.
Collins. About the issue of language. Yes, indeed, language is a barrier. But I would say, I don't know about when you talk about national language policy, if you're talking of a specific policy document that talks about, looks at, I don't know, harmonization or usage. But anyway, what I was going to say is that as much as we have different vernacular languages or indigenous languages, we do have two languages that are widely used. Of course, English is mainly for the literate people, mostly. Those who've gone to school are using English. But even the farmers who have not gone to school have some ability to speak Swahili, which is a national language. And it's like the common language that is used, and very many people can understand Swahili. So in terms of accessing information, even some of the mobile-based innovations that have been developed are disseminate information in the local language, which is Swahili. So that would be my response to that question. About several mobile-based innovations being developed, that it is true, a lot of them in Kenya, but there's still low adoption. And I was saying that I think a lot of emphasis has been placed on embracing use of technology, use of ICT, use of internet, use of mobile phones to access information or to disseminate information. But then very little is being done in terms of what next. So what next after developing these innovations, these mobile-based innovations? There seems to be a gap that is not being addressed in terms of disseminating this particular information about these existing innovations. Yes, they are developing technologies that enable the farmer to access information much easier or quicker, but there's no mechanism in place to push this information to the farmer that actually this technology is available. So you find that they are there, yes, but the farmer don't know that they can just send an SMS and get this information.
Elizabeth.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Actually, the situation is not specific to the women alone, but the emphasis on the women and the interest on the part of the women is that the kind of population that the women have in their hands to work with it's so important for them to have tangible and good information to get across to the women that they are working with in the field, to move them forward, to make them succeed in sustainable agricultural production. And also, it is noticed that even within the office setup, that we know that men go out of their ways to go into the internet by themselves, go to public places, go to the internet by themselves and learn these things. They learn it at the computer centers and the cyber cafes by themselves, but the women are not so pushful like that. So they need the office coming to help them, setting up a place for them to enable them have these things at their disposal and then learn and begin to use them.
Thank you. Chinwe?
Okay. Why is there low use of electronic resources, and why the preference for print?
Yes,
Actually,
why are you pushing for digital?
Actually, I'm not pushing it. It's a result. It's what I discovered that I presented anyway. But then, it's a very unfortunate situation. In fact, why is it unfortunate? I know that the many databases, online databases containing all these research, peer-reviewed resources are provided to developing countries. You have Agora, you have OARI, you have ADI, and you have Hinari, then TIL, for those who can afford it. But then I discovered that the awareness is very, 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 very low. I don't know why, because in my university, I try as much as I can to make people aware of it, and people will still continue to say, we don't know. So I look at it again, maybe they don't have the knowledge, the skill to use it. Because why I look at skill again as another issue is that what we do now using social media is very good because we use aggregation tools to aggregate all this and try to ask them to follow us. But we have another problem, the problem of accepting to follow you, because it's only when they accept to follow you, that is when you begin to give them information. If they just keep quiet, you wouldn't know what. So I discovered that the skill is not there for them to do it, and we are doing e-referencing. What we do, you want this, what research? We do what is called embedded librarianship. So we go to them, ask you are carrying out research? Okay, fine. What is the area? We have interaction with the person. It could be online, it could be offline. Then we get what the person wants, and we now begin to search for that. And then many faculty, like you see my result, students are moving towards ICT than the
faculty
lecturers.
members.
They are very conservative. The early ones, the professors, they don't fancy all these things. And another thing is that if you are used to using ICT, e-books, e-journals, often you will, I know it happens to everybody, you want to print it. You may not like to be reading it like online all this while. You may want to print it. And then the last straw is low research activities.
Yeah.
I discovered that many of these faculty, they don't carry out, they keep recycling what they have known before without wanting to know the current situation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I think we have stolen some 5 minutes. I think that is enough for now. Let's thank our panelists. Thank you.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.